Good morning, campers, and welcome to Radio Camp Half-Blood, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast, and I am your host, Zach.
And I'm B.
And this week, we read Chapter 2 of Percy Jackson's Sea of Monsters, I Play Dodgeball with Cannibals.
So we talked about this chapter title last time, and I guess I was theorizing. You knew what it was all about, because we were kind of talking about the weird bait and switchy nature of a lot of these Percy Jackson chapter titles, but weirdly enough, it was kind of a literal description of what happened in the chapter.
Yeah, they met Maz Nicholson, and it was really weird.
I mean, I guess not cannibals, monsters, but close.
They met monsters that eat people, which are humanoid, so I guess, how does one label cannibalism?
How does one define a cannibal?
I mean, I guess to define a cannibal is a species eating the same species.
Yeah, so I don't know if that counts necessarily. So yeah, we're jumping ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's better than, like, Percy Jackson meets the people that like eating people meets. Oh, God, that just reminded me of a terrible show on Nickelodeon, if you remember. It's the puppet one.
Oh, my God, yes.
Mr. Meaty Meat.
The one, like, the weird puppets, and they worked at, like, they worked at, like, a weird fast food place, and they were all, like, very grotesque.
Yes, and, like, the owner was, like, in, like, a sad wheelchair, and he was blue.
It was an incredibly distressing show. It was for kids. I mean, a lot of things are for kids, I suppose.
So this week we read this chapter, and you know what? This was a little longer than the last chapter, which this one consisted of not 8 pages, which is amazing.
Yeah, it was much longer than the last chapter. Some stuff actually happened. Some moving of the plot. Actually, like I said last episode, a lot did happen in that chapter for the few amount of pages that were actually in it. But this, we get a little bit...
I mean, didn't we get like a message that's like, wow, for 8 pages, you guys could sure talk for an hour.
Yeah, we definitely... I mean, we try to have, like, a pretty robust episode. We talked about other things vaguely related to what that chapter was about.
But yeah, so in this chapter, Percy Jackson is kind of, like, creeped out because, you know, he still thinks that something's off because he's still freaking out about Camp Half-Blood and not being able to go. And on the way, he meets up with his good friend, Tyson.
Yeah, Tyson, who's enormous and a little bit developmentally disabled, I guess, is the kind of situation he has going on. He speaks in, like, very basic sentences. Like, the description of him is really interesting.
He's also, like, the local homeless kid that the school decided to take up.
Yeah, which is very sad and strange that they tried, like, I did like the detail that Percy's mom, like, really wanted to, like, help him and would, like, call social services and stuff, and then every time they tried to find him, they wouldn't see him. So at the very least, there's sort of, like, an indication that she's trying to help this kid who's obviously in, like, a bad situation, who's probably not a typical kid from what we learn in this chapter. I think he's probably involved somehow with magic goings-on. I don't exactly know what mythological thing he actually is, but I don't know if he's exactly a human.
I mean, demigods are really strong, B.
I mean, demigods aren't human, though, right?
Demigods are human. They're half human, half god.
But they're not human, though, then. They're, like, their own thing.
They're their own, like, freaky hybrid? Is this, like, species or, like, splice?
Exactly. When you order an Arnold Palmer, it's not lemonade. It's half lemonade.
Wow, Beak, thanks for alienating half the people. They're not humans. They're not even gods. They're something in between. This sounds like the tagline to, like, the edgy version of Percy Jackson.
Well, they are their own species, though, right? Because normal humans can't, like, eat ambrosia and, like, drink, what is it, nectar? And
yeah, but also normal demigods can, like, have babies with mortals, and that baby would still be immortal.
Well, I mean, a horse can have a baby with a donkey, and it's a mule, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the same type of animal.
So then the whole world would eventually be, there would be enough demigods to repopulate the earth, to either have magical powers, or to be like weird mule hybrid human beings.
Anyway, so demigods are like mules. They can't reproduce. Well, I don't actually know how that whole thing works, but...
There's something that's really weird and creepy about this, because if you think about it, B, if a demigod gets with another demigod, they're technically cousins.
Oh, yeah, because all the gods are related. Ew. That is kind of gross when you think about it. But then, like, if you drew, like, the Punnett square, does that mean if a demigod, two demigods have a kid, then there's, like, a probability like a 1/4 probability that they give birth to a god, a 2/4 probability that, or I guess a half probability that they'll give birth to a demigod, and then a quarter probability that they'll just give birth to a regular human. Is that how that works?
So the moral of the story is, B, Rick Riordan has probably some explanation for it later on in the series with weird genetic stuff.
I'm interested to hear about that.
I can't remember where it is, but I think they clear the air because they realize it's really creepy.
The description of Tyson made me feel like he might be something other than a demigod, because like the focus on his like physicality and like his specific like challenges and strengths were different than other demigods that we'd met so far. So like that's kind of why I assumed.
Was it because like he's like kind of misshapen a little bit?
Yeah, like like his physical description was like, oh, like maybe he's like half, I don't know, Cyclops or something, like some sort of other. Oh, what? Because they don't know his eye color. That's a very specific thing about how he doesn't really describe his eyes so much. So anyway, I have some theories.
Well, Percy can't see his eyes because he's too tall.
He's too tall. Yeah, that's true too.
He can only see up to his teeth.
Yeah, you're not going to confirm any of my theories, but anyway.
Yep, he's Human, actually. That's his real name.
He's a huge man.
Huge man. But I like Tyson because Tyson's kind of like one of those characters that he's very relatable.
Yeah, he's really sweet, and I feel bad for him for being bullied.
I mean, yes, he does get bullied, but it's also kind of like those one weird things. It's almost realistic because how the kids bully him is kind of terrible. And that's kind of like kids are terrible to kids.
Yeah, they are. They're really, truly terrible.
I think kids are worse than adults when it comes to being mean.
Oh, yeah, for sure, because they haven't really developed their empathy.
They have no boundaries.
They're like understanding. Yeah. I definitely think that there's some stuff going on before you reach a certain age. But also at the same time, humans in general can be terrible. Actually, that's kind of the general idea behind most of Roald Dahl's writing, is like, are adults the worst, or are children even more terrible? Let's find out. The answer, everyone's awful.
So Percy and Tyson go to school, and the interesting thing, though, is the first class they do is the English class where they're reading Lord of the Flies, which I love the description they give of Lord of the Flies because it just perfectly sums up the book. Take my first class today, English. The whole middle school had to read this book called Lord of the Flies, where all these kids got marooned on an island and go psycho.
I mean, that's it. That's the book. You nailed it. Nailed it in one.
For me, I actually really enjoy that book there's many reasons on why. Just because it's an interesting allegory, but it's also an interesting example of, what happens behind closed doors for anyone. Like, if you have no rules whatsoever, everyone's gonna be completely different.
It's similar to, like, Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, or, like, even, like, if you've seen that movie, It Comes at Night.
When I try to compare Lord of the Flies, if I want to get someone to read it, I always think of The Giver meets Survivor Man.
Yeah, that's about right.
Again, this is, like, some, like, weird, like, new age type of stuff, and the teacher, like, leaves the kids to their own devices.
It sounds like a social experiment. Like, it feels very, like Stanford Prison Experiment a little bit.
No, it's more vault techy than anything, B.
Oh, that's true. It does feel vault tech. Well, like, I mean, the Stanford Prison Experiment is pretty vault techy.
Well, actually, in Fallout New Vegas, there's a vault where the whole point of it is they are told that they have to sacrifice one person per year. And that person, that makes sure that the vault will always have food and air. And the whole point of the experiment was, hey, you guys are supposed to say no to this because this is insane. Well, it took a very long time for that to happen. And everyone died because they all decided to kill themselves because they were tired of sacrificing people. But if they didn't sacrifice anybody, the vault would have opened up and they would have been free because their experiment would have worked. Because everyone would have had a free will, apparently.
Anyway, getting sidetracked, but basically they do this weird social experiment on the kids to determine whether they understand Lord of the Flies. So the description is, so for our final exam, our teacher sent us into the break yard and spent an hour with no adult supervision to see what would happen. What happened was a massive wedgie contest between the 7th and 8th graders, 2 pebble fights, and a full tackle basketball game. The school bully, Matt Sloan, led most of those activities.
I just imagine how crazy that probably was on the schoolyard. And this was just an hour. People, like, they escalated to that point in an hour. That says a lot about terribleness in this school.
Yeah, I don't really understand descriptions like that.
Okay, here's a good question, B. Have you ever seen someone get a wedgie? Because I feel like this is only as an adult, this is what kids apparently do, is give each other wedgies.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen someone get a wedgie.
I don't get it. Like, it's like one of those like weird things where it's like a middle-aged person that like, this is what the youth know, even though I sure as heck believe Rick Riordan never saw a person get wedgied.
I'm sure there were places where people got wedgies. Like, I've heard stories from, like, my cousins and stuff, like, at other schools. I think it really just depends on your school, like, what insane things people do to bother each other. I think the most common thing that people did to torment other kids at my school was, I told you about this, it was called a turtling or nuggeting, where people would take other kids' backpacks and take all the stuff out of it and then turn it inside out and then put the stuff back in and then zip it up so they, like, couldn't really get it open. And, like, they couldn't carry it around because the straps were, like, inside of the backpack, which I honestly thought was pretty funny because people got very good at, like, being so fast at doing this that by the time a kid got back from, like, going to the bathroom, his entire backpack would be inside out.
Well, for us, I can't remember which middle school I went to that happened like this. Was like a trend. It was called Mr. President. So someone would yell Mr. President and his friends would tackle him. Like, get down, Mr. President!
There was definitely stuff like that when I was in middle school.
And that's like a weird staple, but I guess maybe it's kind of like articulated here where, in the very short hour that the teacher's gone, these kids have completely devolved into like being kids and like hurting each other because they think it's really funny.
I mean, it's also like not, an experiment that would like control for a lot of variables. Like the people who go to this type of school have behavioral issues a lot of times. I think like the point is that they go to this school because they like have issues at other schools and like other learning institutions. So that it's kind of like not exactly the best sample size.
Would this happen at Yancey Academy? I actually don't think it would have.
Really? Because I think at Yancey Academy it would have been worse.
I feel like there would have been like mass stabbings. Or something
yeah, no,
worse.
like, exactly, like, Nancy would have, like, busted open, like, a shiv that she made out of a pencil or something, like, it would have been a nightmare.
Yeah. So the teacher comes back, and he realizes that all these kids have hurt each other in terrible, terrible ways, much like in the book.
He's like, you passed!
You guys passed! Yay! So then after that class, it gets worse. Like, the classes just get progressively worse. Because they go to
throughout the day, the teachers just get more terrible.
So the next one's chemistry, and this is where Percy's teacher, Mrs. Tesla, I don't think they have any correlation to Nikola Tesla in any way, shape, or form.
I mean, there is a correlation in the sense that Rick Riordan was like, I'm making a very smart reference here by using a scientist name.
I'm surprised, like, the English teacher wasn't called Gooding or Goldling.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it feels like he's making, like, very heavy-handed references, but at the same time...
Or he couldn't think of, like, names for teachers.
But, like, I feel like maybe Tesla was more of a deep cut at the time. Like, less people knew about him or learned about him in school. So it was like, oh, yeah, Tesla. Like, he's, like, a more esoteric...
I don't think that. I think because Tesla has always been, like, the psyche of, like, inventors and stuff. Like, you always think of... Edison. They easily could have called him Edison. Mrs. Edison.
Yeah, but Edison would have been, like, way more.
Mrs. Tesla? Or maybe Rick Riordan just likes Nikola Tesla a lot. That's also a possibility.
Maybe. Who knows?
But so, what the class assignment is you're supposed to mix all these chemicals in front of you until something explodes.
Yep, just make an explosion, which is, like, the worst assignment you could possibly give children. Here are some toxic chemicals, just kind of, swish them about, see which one explodes. Like, I'm surely, like...
I guarantee you there's probably one kid in the class, like, named Curie.
And then she dies a slow, painful death from her exposure to radiation.
Miss Tesla had uranium in the class. Like, here, look, kids. You guys want to eat some of it?
Like, my question is, like, what kind of chemicals were they provided? Because the description that happens when Tyson and Percy team up is Tyson was my lab partner. His hands were way too big for the tiny vials we were supposed to use. He accidentally knocked a tray of chemicals off the counter and made an orange mushroom cloud in the trash can. An orange mushroom cloud? Like...
Yeah, that's a chemical explosion.
Exploded upward?
That's not good. It's a nuclear explosion. Hey kids, we're gonna learn how to make mustard gas today. Make sure to breathe it in real deep.
Yeah, just this school, it kind of makes the ending of the last book a little bit frustrating because you're supposed to be like, oh yay, she like sold Gabe's stupid
Corpse?
like sculpture of his ugly face, so that way, yeah, his corpse, to pay for this school that Percy's going to, and then he's going to the school and it's like, it's like underwater basket weaving, like school for morons.
Hey, guy, in his main class is philosophy. You have like the Dead Poet Society almost.
Oh, if only it was the Dead Poet Society. It's not even.
Actually, the teacher saw like 10 minutes of Dead Poet Society and thought he got the gist of it, and that's the whole class. But here it's really funny because you have chemical explosions. And the teacher's like, well, I guess I gotta call poison control now. Everyone get out.
But also they pass, and she like commends them for just passing her class so soon.
Tyson, you're a natural chemist.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Have you met my colleague Walter White?
Yeah, seriously.
It's like almost mind-blowing how stupid the school is. And then finally we get to the last class, which is PE.
Also known as where people go to get murdered, apparently. Because this is where the titular stuff goes down from the name of the chapter, because there's a dodgeball tournament, and there is in fact a whole bunch of murderous monsters that Percy has to fight with dodgeballs, but they're not actually dodgeballs, they're bronze orbs filled with lava or something.
Yeah, they're the new age dodgeballs. You know how some people have hacky sacks? This school just has...
like really heavy metal dodgeball.
That sounds so metal right now.
I mean, this is the kind of thing that would actually like take off in Brooklyn or something. It's like, oh yeah, I'm doing like extreme dodgeball.
Here it's like it's like not only are there like these new kids in the class, but also there's Matt Sloan, who is the absolute worst.
There's always one bully, right? There's always the specific bully who bothers Percy and everybody else.
The funny thing is he doesn't bother Percy. He bothers Tyson.
I mean, he kind of bothers Percy, but I feel like he doesn't have any beef with Percy because Percy can, like, defend himself. Well, he knows that Tyson is, like, really sensitive, so he picks on him.
Well, the way to describe it in the book is if you see Tyson, he's, like, super scary looking. But then when you hear him speak and stuff, it's just like, oh, don't worry about him. It's kind of like that, like he thinks that, obviously, I would imagine Matt Sloan tries to be, like, the big top dog. So by making fun of Tyson, who looks like the big top dog, like
he like asserts his dominance.
It's like a dog peeing on a tree.
Yeah, that's definitely what's going on. I mean, I think there's even a line where he says that, where he's like, he didn't look like he was like the big man on campus, basically, but he acted like he was. It was like all about his attitude.
It's the same as before PE, Percy and Tyson get changed, and Tyson's like really shy when it comes to like getting changed. So kind of Percy kind of guards him while he does and kind of sees.
Yeah, that made me sad, that scene.
Where it's like there's just a bunch of scars, and also Tyson's like really hairy, which is a weird thing because I can relate to this. For me, I hit puberty early, so it's just like had like hairy legs and stuff, and like all the kids were like, I don't get
Changing
it now.
In the locker room was like such a stressful time because you're like, it's literally just as like you're going through all sorts of like puberty changes, and it's like incredibly awkward, and everybody's like at their absolute meanest and cruelest they could ever be.
Yeah, because I had like hairy legs, and people were like making fun of me for having hairy legs, and now everyone has hairy legs, pretty much.
I mean, like, I had hairy legs, and I was like, not a dude, so that was like a rough time for everybody involved. Like, girls are really mean to each other in middle school.
Oh, no, most definitely. Like, when it comes to, like female locker rooms, I would imagine they're much worse than dude locker rooms. Like, in dude locker rooms, it's just, like, people, like, making fun of each other. Just don't say anything, because it's, like, if you say anything, it gets awkward real quick.
Yeah, or, like, maybe you know each other and you'll, like, be joking around. But, like, I have a distinct memory of being in middle school, and I saw this girl in the bathroom of the locker room, and she was like fixing her braces or something, and I was like, oh, I almost had to get braces, I'm glad that I didn't. And then I was like, kind of just like, I was just making small talk, whatever. And this girl, I swear to this day, I remember what she said to me because it was so unnecessarily cruel and strange. She said, I'm not your friend, and I don't want to be your friend, and I don't want to talk to you. And I was like, listen, I was being nice to you, brace face, okay?
There's like a weird thing, especially like in the locker room, where people are. I guess maybe it's kind of like you're at your most vulnerable because you're like pretty much naked.
She does have very good teeth now.
Wow, B, you're looking them up?
Anyway, moving on.
Here we are. We should just have like a public service announcement about bullies. But yeah. So Matt Sloan is the absolute worst.
He's terrible. Yeah, the description of him is really interesting. Sloan wasn't big or strong, but he acted like he was. He had eyes like a pit bull and shaggy black hair, and he always dressed in expensive but sloppy clothes, like he wanted everybody to see how little he cared about his family's money.
But also he had like a chip on his tooth because he stole his family Porsche.
He did a joyride and then crashed into a "Please slow down for children" sign.
Which is kind of like, what was his name? Twitch in Holes?
Oh, yeah.
The exact same, it was the same, exact same, it was a Porsche?
Yes, it's the exact same character. You know how there's only a few kinds of kid? There's protagonist, there's Lorge, and there's Joyride.
Apparently there's only like so many like versions of like a delinquent.
Yeah,
possibly.
It's true.
But it's like really weird when it comes to him because like he is the absolute worst to Tyson. And now he's starting to get like a little bit of a posse of like these really weird kids.
Yeah, this inexplicable posse that appears out of nowhere.
Yeah, a posse that appears out of nowhere, and there's like this bunch of like weird kids that have like weird, strange names on their name tags.
Yeah, like Marrow Sucker, Skull Eater, and Joe Bob. I love like the monkey wrench of just Joe Bob.
It's Joe Bob Briggs, B.
I love no human beings had names like that. Not even Joe Bob. I know a Jim Bob.
I mean, like, the way you're supposed to say it, I think, is kind of like, it's like super edgy, so it's like, Marrow Sucker, Skull Eater, and Joe Bob.
Joe Bob. Hey, Joe Bob.
He seems like the regular, like, average person. Have you ever seen, What We Do in the Shadows?
Yes.
I always think of the one normal friend that they have.
Oh, yeah, he just, like, comes over and hangs out with the vampires.
We like Stu. But yeah, so like they have like this weird posse of people, and their PE teacher is like super decrepit.
Yeah, he's 1,000,000 years old.
He reads nothing but Sports Illustrated, which seemed really weird to me. But then I realized I'm guarantee you they probably cut a line from that because it's probably the swimsuit edition.
Because otherwise he would not be so engrossed in what he was reading. Or I guess that's maybe just like the implication of him reading Sports Illustrated.
For me, when I think of this, is if they remade this now, that would be like the Stan Lee cameo. It would most likely be Rick Riordan or somebody.
Oh yeah, it definitely would be.
Like listening to like music.
Exactly, like not noticing what's going on around him.
It's always weird. I don't know when it comes to like creator cameos, but like a lot of movies don't do them anymore, except for maybe Marvel. And even in Series of Unfortunate Events, there's like like you're trying to like look
fish
for
heads, roly-poly fish heads. Creator cameos can be a little bit cheesy, but I think it would be funny if it was like Rick Riordan just being like, like sort of shrugging as like all this stuff was going down.
Well, I mean, there's the Stan Lee cameo in the first Amazing Spider-Man.
No, exactly. Yeah, it would be the same. It would be the same bit, but it would still be funny. Basically, we're introduced to this new, I guess, roster of terrible people who like Percy doesn't recognize. They've appeared out of nowhere because they're like these new like prospective students. The explanation is kind of fuzzy.
They're from Detroit, apparently.
Yeah, whatever. Like, these guys are moving here next year, Sloan bragged.
I like how that's his voice that he has. We're giving him like a I don't know, was it like a Joe Pesci almost, like a pretty side
like,
voice.
These guys are moving here next year. Like, that's a Joe Pesci.
So we have to get every time there's a bully character, we have to give him an annoying voice.
Yeah. Well, did we give an annoying voice to Nancy Boba Fett? I don't remember.
Hey guys, I'm Nancy Boba Fett.
Yeah, that's my headcanon voice of Nancy.
For me, when it comes to annoying voices for like little girls, I always find it the funniest when they dub it over with a man's voice, like a really big burly man's voice.
Like Grenda from what is it, Gravity Falls?
Yeah. Kind of like Grenda from Gravity Falls, except she's not a bad character.
Exactly, yeah. It's like the bait and switch, but it is funny. Anyway, Sloan introduces these terrible friends, and then this is like a situation where they like.
I mean, this is okay. So So what happens in this is, I'm going to say it's from the times, because this is still 2006. We've come a decade, so this is, when we're reading this, it's kind of like you have to look at it from the modern perspective now. Not, you need to look at it from when it was written, not how it's written now. I'm sure Rick Riordan, I'm sure, has gone on record or something, because he has changed things in the past. I'm surprised this one wasn't changed. But why don't you go, B? Why don't you say it? I'm not equipped to say this.
Well, like, basically, so he's making fun of Tyson in comparison to these new friends. He says, "These guys are moving here next year," Sloane bragged. Like that was supposed to scare me. "I bet they can pay tuition too, unlike your friend." And he says the R word, essentially, which is like...
Well, okay, it's the hard R word, not the R
Yeah,
word.
it's... And what the weird thing about this part is, and because then like Percy reiterates it to him, where he's like, "Oh, he's not the R word," which is like kind of a weird way to respond.
Well, he's not, okay, I guess the best way to put it is, for the people that don't know,
He's like intellectually disabled, and that's like they're using like a slur against that, which is like really upsetting and sad. And like I think if Rick Riordan wrote it now.
And like the problem though is, like, for me while I was reading it kind of took me out of the scene, because it was like so out of character from the first book.
Yeah, it was like so severe, I guess, was like, as far as like language goes, it seemed a little bit intense. But I think maybe it was considered less... I mean, obviously he's the villain or whatever. He's like not a good character who's saying this.
Well, Percy says it too, so it's like...
But then Percy says it too. I mean, like, he says like he's not that, but it's sort of like, oh, but you can say that word. So it's like Percy... Yeah, I definitely think that if Rick wrote this now, he'd probably maybe leave that out or like phrase it differently.
No, he probably would have left it out. You know what? I'm sure the reason why he wrote that in there, I'm surprised, because here's the reason why I'm surprised. This is Disney Hyperion, so, you know, obviously it had to go through like 6 different editors probably. But it's like, it's such a weird thing to have in a book that's kind of established, of having like, hey, you know, there's kids with these disabilities, like the superpowers, and then you have like the juxtaposition of this, or maybe it has to probably be because it is the bully character of Matt Sloane, that it's like, hey, you know, kids are bad to other kids. Maybe that's what Rick Riordan was trying to say.
This struck me both because it seemed a little bit out of character for the books, but it also seemed incredibly in character for a kid that age. That's exactly what a bully that age would say. That's like, it seemed very accurate.
No, there are far worse things that kid could have said.
Yeah, no, I've basically heard someone say exactly that to somebody that I knew. You know what I mean? I've heard people bully in this exact way. So it's a complicated thing when you're doing stuff for children, where it's like you're representing their struggles and the types of difficulties they have to face, and one of those difficulties is bullies, and bullies say really hurtful things, so like the way that you phrase that can be a little bit delicate. And I think also of the time, they didn't necessarily realize how harsh of a word that was.
Well, I mean, okay, so here's the thing, B. I'm going to look at this from Rick Riordan as a person. Rick Riordan, prior to writing Percy Jackson, was a middle school teacher. So I guarantee you he heard every little thing. And he was kind of like, maybe, I like how we're trying to define like this bad word. But it's like the hard part about writing a book like this is, you know, the other words that he could have said. And obviously, you know, a lot of people pretty much in like a committee, or maybe at least 3 or 4 people proofread it, and they said it was okay. So you have to look at it as, this is something of the time, but also kids are hurtful to each other, and they will say things like this. They will call like other things too. Right.
It's kind of a miracle that they don't curse more. Like, obviously that it's a kid's book, so it really depends on like what direction they go in. And there are definitely, you know.
Is it okay to have it in the book now? I mean, I guess they could do like another reprint, because even
I think now they probably wouldn't have Percy say it also. And it would be like more of like a clear admonishing.
There would be like another line of dialogue. I'm like, I can see Matt Sloane doing it, but maybe not Percy. I mean, in context of the dialogue.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe not Percy, and then maybe Percy would say something like, you shouldn't say that, or like, you know what I mean? And like, it would be like more of a clear teaching moment, I guess.
But also, it's like the weird thing of how when Percy uses it, he's using it kind of like in the defense of Tyson, like, hey, he's not this.
Exactly. But then at the same time, that puts down other kids who's like, oh, well, some kids are. Like, he wasn't saying in general you shouldn't say that to anyone. He's saying, oh, well, he's not. He's not dumb the way you think that he's dumb, but some people are dumb. Like, it's like the implied nature of saying that, oh, he's not that. You know what I mean?
We're looking at it it's just this one moment. It's not like a generalization. If there's other kids around there, I guarantee you Percy he's the type of person that would defend those people because he's in that situation where, they're not, I'm not saying that they're not normal in society, but it's like most people in society perceive them differently, as well as someone that has dyslexia or ADHD and stuff. They're kind of like,
I mean, that's also a obvious reason why Percy and Tyson are close, because like they both feel like ostracized and different because of like their learning disabilities.
Oh yeah, no, and there's like, for me, I grew up in special ed classes.
Yeah. No, yeah, like I had like a 504 when I was like in middle school and high school, like would get extra time on tests and stuff. And it's a really like complicated and weird thing to be a kid and to like be set aside to like have special accommodations because of like some sort of like issues with like school, whether it's like focus or anxiety or whatever, attention.
With having like a book like this, it's kind of like with Rick Riordan putting in this into his book, it's kind of like almost contradicts a little bit of like his teaching, because I don't think Percy defends Tyson or defends that in a way it's where Percy Jackson's, you can look at the same way Percy Jackson and Tyson in two separate ways, but they're still special in the same way, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, exactly. They have similarities. So anyway.
I don't know, do I consider this like something that needs to be changed? Because it's kind of like, unfortunately, it is a part of the times, but also it's kind of like one of those things that's like kids being terrible to each other. Like, what other way could you get that across? Whereas, obviously in the arc of the story, Tyson obviously has the upper hand because he uses his special abilities, whereas Matt Sloan has none.
This made me think a little bit of like Stand By Me, where it has like really young kids like saying a lot of like cruel like words and cursing.
It's almost like Lord of the Flies from the 80s as well.
Yeah, actually Lord of the Flies too. It's an interesting thing that they make a reference to that and then they immediately like show like a really kind of harsh bullying situation.
Which, bullying sucks.
Right, it's also like beneficial to some extent to like show the truth of how severe bullying could be, because then kids are reading this and going, oh, like I've been called that word before. I'm not alone because there are characters in this book. You know what I mean? There's benefits and
well, yeah, I always think of like what the War Doctor says, and that's, great men are forged in fire. It's a privilege of lesser men to light the flames. A word is a word, except, how does one person like not be defined by that word and kind of like prove the other person wrong at the same time.
And I think thus far the Percy Jackson series has done a good job of like handling people who have learning disabilities and like other like differences. So I think I like trust Rick Riordan in general to like handle those things well. So that's why like I didn't immediately assume the worst case scenario when I read this. You know what I mean? I didn't immediately go like, oh well, he wrote that because he's trying to like be shocking or try to be like say that that's okay. It's very clear what like the message he's trying to send.
But I mean, it's okay to be uncomfortable at times. I think that's kind of like the point. I mean, look at To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, it's speaking to the truth of the discomfort. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of To Kill a Mockingbird is to be uncomfortable, not from, just anyone, the reader's perspective, but also from Scout and also the whole town of Maycomb, where they're a bunch of like raging racists. Atticus Finch does is he kind of makes them feel uncomfortable, and they delegate for at least 40 minutes to an hour and question instead of just like sending this man to die.
It's funny that we keep name checking like required reading books in high school because it's like it goes right back to the reference.
Obviously, there's a reason on why they're required reading,
and it's also there's definitely a reason why they mention Lord of the Flies in the beginning of this chapter. There's a reason kids read those books when they are developing as people. It's to learn how to be good people. Yeah, I think in general Rick Riordan has done a good job like handling this kind of stuff, so I'm not too thrown off by it.
Rick Riordan does a fantastic job handling this stuff. It isn't rocky road because obviously this book was written 10 years ago. Everyone has a different opinion from where they were 10 years ago.
Yeah, this chapter, like, it's interesting because it goes from, like, a lot of, like, serious bullying stuff into kind of, like, the more fantastical magic stuff. Because then the bullying stops being kind of more psychological and then becomes, like, mythological.
The way I look at it is there's a lot of the story beats in this chapter are it goes from like kind of being humorous in the beginning with like Lord of the Flies and the chemistry stuff to suddenly being like a dour beat almost. It's like there's the weird like when you think of like story beats, a chapter should either be set in either 2 or 3 tones. This one's kind of like all over the place and how it goes from like being super silly to super, like a dour like about bullying and serious, and then all of a sudden it goes to like silly again, and then action, and then more like dour
Yeah,
stuff.
there's like a lot going on in this chapter, honestly. Like the tone is like all sorts of over the place. I mean, not even in like a bad way. I think it's like handled well, but it's interesting how it like goes from like humorous to like really serious, and then like very like super realistic. Like the bullying parts feel like pretty true to life, and then like
I've been in those shoes, and it's like one of those things where it's very true and like down to the nitty gritty.
So anyway, after that unfortunate situation with Tyson and the bullies... Okay, so here's where I'm going to reveal to you what this dodgeball fight reminded me of.
And to the listeners at home, before we started recording this, B told me that they had a little surprise for me, and they would refuse to tell me what the scene reminded them of.
Okay, is it just me, or was this incredibly reminiscent of Space Jam? I mean... There's the monsters, they're playing a game. Come on and slam, welcome to the jam.
Excuse me, listeners, but I'm gonna go outside and I have about like a 6-hour start to Mexico. I have a lot to think about.
Are you gonna abandon me here?
I'm not going to abandon you, B. That didn't even come into my mind. I have to like find like the inner Space Jam. We have to come on and jam. Come on and Space Jam, B. Come on and slam.
The funny thing is, because the one thing I was thinking about in this chapter is there was something about the way the dialogue was written and like the way the bullies spoke, and I don't know.
Now this is making, the way you've just said it, the light bulb in my head just like clicked on right now, and I just realized the whole plot of Space Jam is like a bunch of like puny like alien creatures getting super big and then having like this big old competition. And it makes sense now because Michael Jordan like pops out in this book for some reason, the edition that I have now. Like, oh, that was kind of weird. But I mean, let's see how he handles Percy Jackson.
Listen, I'm not saying it's a 1-to-1 comparison, but in general, this chapter was reminiscent of late 90s, early 2000s kind of like Nickelodeon Disney content. It was very like, oh yeah, well you're like whatever, like the way that the bullies talked, and like even like the way that Percy kind of had like this like snarky like bent to his narration of like his descriptions of things. It felt very much like Space Jam.
But yeah, I can see how it's like a lot like Space Jam. So they have like this big old like epic dodgeball competition.
He waved his hand and a new batch of dodgeballs appeared at the center line, but these balls weren't made of red rubber. They were bronze, the size of cannonballs, perforated like wiffle balls, with fire bubbling out of the holes. They must have been searing hot, but the giants picked them up with their bare hands. So they're kind of like just lava balls. Metal lava balls.
In my brain when I think of this, I think of how there's like real life Quidditch.
Yeah, real life murder ball.
Yeah, real life murder ball. And you're like, oh no, children, don't do that.
Yeah, they just like set ping pong balls on fire and just toss them back and forth.
I've gone to like a party with like nerds and we've played beer pong, but their Quidditch has like the little Quidditch hoops.
I've done that too.
It's so much fun to do.
I didn't actually play, but like there was a Quidditch pong with like the hoops and everything. So they have these spooky metal balls filled with fire.
So they're playing dodgeball. And the problem is it's almost like a comedy shot where they throw the first dodgeball and like embeds itself into a wall right behind Percy. Like, whoa, you got to be careful there. And then like the gigantic bully characters like start to get bigger and they start to grow like comedic tattoos, like hearts that say mom in it.
Yeah, basically like the SpongeBob like concept of a tough guy.
Ah, yes, the salty Splatoon.
Exactly.
How tough are you?
I'm this tough. I'm not a weenie.
Oh, God. It's so weird because, they have all these names and like one of them's like saying, "Oh, I'm gonna bring back like a doggy bag for my baby cakes."
Oh yeah, baby cakes. Ugh. Like all of the other ones get murdered, and then he's like the last one. So he's like, "Oh, I'll have more meat," because like they don't just care about killing Percy.
See, but then that kind of like brings up the problem though with this is like he's trying to like burn them alive. Like if he hits like a kid, do the balls explode?
I don't know, like flambéed child. I don't exactly understand.
It's like almost like a horrific thing to even think about. Like no one gets hurt in this, except like my favorite part is almost like in Amazing Spider-Man, the old PE teacher's just reading his magazine, not really paying much attention.
Yeah, I like so they describe the mist again, like the thing that keeps mortals dumb, basically, of all the stuff going on. And this really affects the coach. Basically, they say, Nunley looked up sleepily, but if he saw anything abnormal about the dodgeball game, he didn't let on. That's the problem with mortals. A magical force called the mist obscures the true appearance of monsters and gods from their vision, so mortals tend to see only what they can understand. Maybe the coach saw a few 8th graders pounding the younger kids, like usual. Maybe the other kids saw Matt Sloane's thugs getting ready to toss Molotov cocktails around. It wouldn't have been the first time. At any rate, I was pretty sure nobody else realized we were dealing with genuine man-eating bloodthirsty monsters.
But B, there's kind of like a continuity error here in how, Matt Sloane like turns around and he kind of sees them getting all super big and stuff. Like, he's pretty mortal. It's like a weird thing when it comes to these books is...
Yeah, that, like, he can see certain things. So I guess, like, if you were close enough to what's going on, then some mortals can see what's going on, but it's confusing how that all works.
I mean, they kind of like the same thing with, like, Percy's mom. Like, she saw the Minotaur.
Right, exactly. So, she saw the Minotaur, but that's because maybe she's aware of the Minotaur, like, once you're, like, aware of that stuff. I don't exactly know.
Once you're woke?
Yeah. Once you know the truth.
Yeah, once you're woke to the truth.
But does that mean that Matt Sloane knew all along that his monster friends were actually monsters?
I think it's just kind of like in the moment type of writing. A little bit of like continuity error here, a little bit. That's perfectly fine. The one thing I like about this dodgeball game, though, is, Percy Jackson's first instinct is to pull out Riptide.
And then he doesn't have Riptide.
And he's wearing his gym shorts. Obviously it would come into his pocket. His pants don't have pockets in them.
So he left Riptide in the gym.
They're currently stuck in the locker room in his jeans. You know what this reminds me of, B?
What?
It reminds me of The Empire Strikes Back. And how you know what the sword does, but in the process of when Luke's like on Hoth with the Wampa, he can't get to his lightsaber. He has to use his magical powers and kind of like think of a way to outsmart the monster without just using his lightsaber. It's kind of the same thing here.
Yeah, so it's like a superficial situation where he has to be more clever than, like, the typical...
Like, you would know exactly, obviously, if Percy Jackson had a sword, he could defeat these guys super easily.
Exactly.
But he's now in a situation where he doesn't have a sword. I mean, this also could be possibly, like, Ares doing, because remember, Ares did kind of curse Percy a little bit.
Yeah, so it's not as cut and dry, I guess, as, like... I think sometimes, I mean, you and I have talked about this, I don't find action, like, to be the most interesting part of the book. So I did like the added challenge of him not having the weapon he always has.
Then what about the action challenge in this? Because I feel like this is really creative. Like, in my brain, how I, like, set up stories and stuff is, like, how is the person going to get out of this? That's what should always be the question you should propose no matter what action piece you have. That's why I love Die Hard and how... John McClane, he gets his feet wounded near the end of that movie. He's like, oh, how's he going to get out of this? It's like one of those things.
Exactly. It's like an extenuating circumstance where you can't just go like, oh, of course he's going to use Riptide. He's just going to kill these people. Like, it like makes more sense to, like, complicate things.
It's the same as how my favorite version of this is the setup and payoff in Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indy is trying to get Miriam in the marketplace and the guy with the sword comes out and he just shoots him.
I love that scene.
Well, in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, they have the same setup and he goes for his gun and he doesn't have it. And then Indy just runs away. It's the great setup and payoff.
Yeah, I like that, like, added challenge. Even though it can be a little contrived, it, like, makes perfect sense for this scene. Like, oh, of course, he wouldn't have Riptide because he's playing... Like, it's a good justification for why he wouldn't have it.
It can be like a little bit cliche, but it has to depend on the situation that it's written. If it happens like every time, it's kind of boring. But, obviously in this situation it works because, I'm sorry, but I've only have PE shorts that have pockets just for that very situation of like I kind of need pockets in my gym shorts.
What do you put in your gym shorts pockets though? Like your iPod, I guess? I don't know.
I put my iPod and I put my wallet in. I don't want people stealing my stuff.
That's true. You don't want to put that in your locker.
You know what I thought of that would have been really clever to kind of like get away from this rule?
Mm-hmm.
Is Percy Jackson rips open his gym shorts to make a pocket.
Oh my god.
And then all of a sudden his pen's there. You know, you kind of like, you have to like twist the rules in a way that it works within the logic of the story, which that could have worked as well. But I like the way that makes it sound even funnier what Percy does. And it's really funny. And I would love to see this. I can't remember if it's in Sea of Monsters. Probably not, because that movie's probably not creative.
Yeah.
Percy Jackson realizes that he needs to get close to the good old-fashioned boys' locker room.
Yeah, this joke is like very ridiculous.
So he realizes that there's probably enough stank in that locker room to
cause an explosion, which is like ridiculous. They're like, now I figure that built up gas in most boys' locker rooms was enough to cause an explosion, so I wasn't surprised when the flaming dodgeball ignited a huge whoom. Which, like, okay.
Which just sounds ridiculous. Like, it sounds so stupid.
Yeah, it's like, it was a little silly, honestly.
B, you gotta think of it this way. That just sounds like a safety disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, right? Like, there's just, like, so much poisonous, flammable gas.
Okay, B, I know you have never seen this movie. Have you ever heard of the movie Battlefield Earth?
Yes, I have.
It's a Scientology movie.
Yeah, it's a Scientology movie, right? Doesn't have,
John Travolta. In the movie... This is even a spoiler. I don't even care because this movie's terrible.
Okay, but like honestly, you're saving them from watching this movie.
I'm saving them. So they figured out that the planet that the aliens come from, if there's even like a small explosion, the whole planet will blow up.
Oh my god.
So they launch a nuke at the place and it just blows up. So one explosion blows up this entire planet.
I love that aliens seem to have like the most ridiculous weaknesses in movies. It's just like, signs? It's just water, you know, the planet's made of water, but they're just gonna go.
Oh, and wooden doors. Don't forget the wooden doors, B. But it's almost like that stupid. Like it's so illogical that it happens.
Yeah, like if they were like, oh, they hit like a gas main or something, like there could have been just like some sort of justification. But like the fact that like the joke is supposed to justify the actual thing happening is weird. It's like a weird justification because it's not like a magic thing. It's just like a physics thing that they got wrong.
No. I want to ask like any person that studies like environmental science and just ask them. So, how much like farts and like boy stink would it take to actually cause like a huge explosion that blows like half of the school up?
A lot, I'm sure.
Like, there's so much methane that needs to be involved, it's probably really stupid.
Yeah, you'd have to just, like, have, like, a constant supply of cows in there. Like, it would just not... And, like, also it would have to be, like, vacuum sealed. There's just no way.
Okay, if there's any science... Actually, I'm going to ask my friend Chris Cogswell of the Mad Scientist podcast how much methane it would probably take to blow up half of a school. And boy stink. And I'll get this question for you guys. So if you haven't listened to the Mad Scientist podcast, go listen to it. It's really good.
I love the phrase boy stink like it's like a compound word. There's stink and there's boys and then there's boy stink. It's a special kind of stink. The stinky stink that stinks.
Well,
Stinkily.
actually, okay. If we're going to think about this scientifically, maybe if all like the kids' Axe body sprays, because I'm sure every kid has an Axe body spray and those like little like cans, if they all probably went off, maybe?
Oh, right. The Axe body spray. That's the answer. That's what it was.
We solved it.
You solved it.
We solved it.
Because that actually would cause an explosion.
So while that's happening, Percy gets a sword and like unsheathes it. And oh no, Percy's kind of like being outnumbered. And all of a sudden one of them dies. And it turns out Annabeth is there.
Yeah, so there's like a minor mention of Annabeth in the beginning of this chapter when Percy's like looking at a picture of her, like thinking like, oh, like she's smarter than me. She would like figure this stuff out about the dream that I had about Grover and I wish she was here. And then like, of course, like Jerky McJerkface, what's his name? Sloane is like teasing him like, oh, is that your girlfriend or whatever, like the way that kids do. And now she's actually here. And then we realize that shadow that he kept seeing this morning was actually Annabeth stalking him.
Which I think is really adorable that Percy has a photo of Annabeth
Yeah,
a little
it's
bit.
sweet. It makes me happy. I think it's really sweet that he's like, I like the sort of line where he said, like, oh, he likes to remind himself that Camp Half Blood is like a real place.
But yeah, he doesn't have a picture of Grover. It's just Annabeth.
Yeah, he doesn't have, well, I guess Grover never emailed him a picture because Grover's off, like, on his, like, quest or whatever.
I mean, I guess Grover could have sent some like a 2005 like picture text.
Yeah, like, so much data used for just, like, a really grainy picture of Grover just, like, waving with his goat legs. Annabeth makes her appearance. At long last, she, saves Percy from death.
For also, we find out the names of the gigantic giants,
Oh, yeah, they, like, say they're...
Lestragonians.
Right, that's what it was. I couldn't, like, remember the word because it's kind of like a mouthful.
The way I pronounce it, because I looked up how to pronounce this, it's kind of like Lester, and then you say Gonians.
Right.
It's like a two, you break it down. In the myth, I kind of looked it up as well. They're like giants that actually do eat people. They're like, they go like, people get stranded on islands and Lestragonians kind of come there and just eat them.
People eating giants. They also reminded me a little bit of
The trolls from The
giants.
Hobbit.
Is it the trolls from The Hobbit? Yeah, the trolls from The Hobbit. I couldn't think of what creatures they were. They're trolls.
Even in like Percy Jackson, they figure like a clever ways to actually like defeat them. Like the last one, I think it was, what is it, Marrowsucker?
Marrowsucker.
He throws a ball at Tyson, and Tyson like just grabs the ball.
Yeah, he just goes for it. And this is when I started to think, okay, Tyson's probably not a normal human.
Obviously, all the Lestragonians are killed, and luckily, Annabeth and Tyson go at the gigantic blown-out hole from the boy stank.
Yeah, because they're about to be blamed for everything that happens. And then, of course, like, Sloane lies about the whole situation and says that, like...
Percy Jackson blew up the school.
Yeah, Percy did it. Mr. Bonsai, he set the whole building on fire. Coach Nunley will tell you he saw it all. And then, of course, just my luck, he chose that moment to look up when Sloane said his name. Yeah, mm-hmm.
Now, Percy Jackson jumps out of the gigantic crater, and now he's another boy on the run.
Yep, here he is, on the run again.
Is there like a triple jeopardy at this point of being like a domestic terrorist? You've kind of like blown up like a couple things, Percy. It's kind of, maybe we should keep an eye on you a little bit. First one's, shame on us. This one's like, shame on you.
Yeah, the thing... I've been thinking about this. I mean, I guess you could ask the same question about Hogwarts to some extent, but I think it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that there is only a camp for Half-Bloods when they should probably just go to like a school for Half-Bloods, so there's like an understanding of the situations going on when they're trying to learn, because it's the reverse Hogwarts situation of like, oh, in your like day-to-day life in the summer when you're not there during the school year, then there aren't people to understand the magic stuff going on, and it's the same kind of situation of like the muggles / mortals are like oblivious, and then they're gonna blame you for what's happening. So I don't understand why there isn't a school that they could go to instead of this school with all these people.
Now, is it because... Okay, are you trying to say that there should be a school just for Half-Bloods and stuff? Or are you saying there should be like a school in the public?
Yeah, or like just for people who understand the magic stuff going on with like the mythological creatures and with the Half-Bloods and the monsters and the gods.
There's actually a built-in reason for that in Harry Potter. And that is if Muggles knew about magic, they'd want all their problems solved with magic.
Oh no, but I'm not saying that they could hide it though. Like it would just be like a year-round thing, and it's the same thing as like, why doesn't Camp Half-Blood?
Okay, I thought you were talking about like we're gonna have a school just for Half-Bloods
and just be open about it. No, I don't think that they should be open about it. I'm saying like Camp Half-Blood. Why doesn't Camp Half-Blood also have like a Half-Blood Academy or something?
Well, the reason why for that is because these kids want to feel normal, like they want to go back to the mortal world.
I guess.
Kind of like live their lives. Because there are kids that stay at Camp Half-Blood the entire, they're called year-rounders. I mean, it's like, if you think of it, do you really want like Jim Jones Crayon teaching your kids all year round about like math and science and stuff, even though in theory he could disprove it all with like, oh, that was Zeus's stuff.
Yeah, right. There's a whole like complicated question, right? It's like the Hogwarts question of like, do they learn about science?
I think the reason why they don't do that also is kind of like to assimilate into society more. Because, if you go to a year-round school for just Half-Bloods and all of a sudden you're thrown back, and let's just say there's like K through 12, after, I guess Half-Blood high school, they go back into society and it's like, what do we, like they're almost like the Gravity Falls joke about the boys band that are grown. Like, they don't know how to do anything
Yeah.
in the human world. But also, it's like you have to think about is Percy Jackson's really special because he's like a part of the big three? How there's like other demigods that may not ever be detected by like monsters and stuff because they're not like super potent and super powerful. That might be a factor as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a lot of justifications, I'm sure, for why like it isn't a year-round thing. Because I guess like you could volunteer to stay at Camp Half-Blood year-round, but it's just like it seems like more trouble than it's worth to like constantly have to explain yourself when like all this magical stuff keeps interfering with your learning.
Well, it's only Percy because, he's the titular character in this book series.
Right, I guess, and he attracts more monsters because he's more of a big three.
So Percy Jackson jumps out and goes out into the sunset.
Well, sunset, yeah. He just kind of escapes in a mad dash and hopes he doesn't get caught.
So B, what is the name of the next chapter?
We hail the taxi of eternal torment. I've been in that taxi.
I've been in that taxi too, B.
I think everybody's been in that taxi.
Actually, it's more like the Uber driver of like eternal torment.
Yeah, the Uber, yeah. It's lifting you, but really, it's lowering you into hell.
So next week, we're going to talk to you guys about our weird Uber driver experiences.
Yeah, I actually haven't had a lot. I've more had bad taxi driver experiences. Again, that's your life when you live in New York.
So B, what did you think of this chapter?
I like this chapter. A lot happened. Again, it reminded me of Space Jam. It was exciting. We were introduced to a lot of new characters, like a new setting. I thought, what is it, Merriweather School? No, I can't remember the name of the school.
New Age School of Babel. Yeah, no, I really like this chapter. There's like a lot of like, for me, the story beats were like all over the place, but in the end, I did have some chuckles when it came to like the ending scenarios. Even the beginning I thought was really funny. I think the middle, it's kind of like a weird like seriousness to it that almost like takes you out for a little bit. Like
No, I know what you mean. Like when the bullying gets really intense. And also even like, I don't know, I think the dodgeball game was fun enough. I wasn't like super invested in it because I like had a feeling like, oh, like someone's gonna swoop in, he's gonna go off to Camp Half-Blood and figure out what's happening or something like that. Like I kind of like saw that Annabeth or somebody was gonna swoop in.
I mean, obviously that has to happen, but here we are now heading towards Camp Half-Blood. We're going to be taking the Eternal Taxi of Torment.
Yeah, Eternal Taxi of Torment, which is most taxis, I would say.
So we have one iTunes review. Amazing from Cat Person J. I believe this one's actually, I checked it, this one's from India. I discovered Percy Jackson last year and have read all the books several times, but I did have some questions. With you two reading it and discussing it, it certainly has become very interesting. Basically, thumbs up emoji, waterfall, or I guess riptide thingy. I can't read these emojis, but there's also a trident, so it's really adorable. Thank you so much, Cat Person J. We really appreciate it. So we didn't get any Iris messages this week, which is okay. I think we actually read them all last week. I think we had a lot
we got
of
an abundance of them last week. So, but yeah, you guys can always send us new ones. We always like to hear your thoughts.
So you can email us at radiocamphalfblood@gmail.com. Where can they find you, B?
You can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com, and you can find me on Twitter at bkellygorman.
If you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter at Suda41, that's SUDA41. And if you want to follow our show on Twitter, you can follow us at halfblood_radio. Well, I think that kind of concludes the show. We actually recently put up our Patreon exclusive episode, Holes, which is really rad. You can only find it there. You can listen to it for $1. We have t-shirts available. If you want to get one of our t-shirts, you can just go to our website, www.ghoulersfancies.com. And we also have a lot of our stuff on our Patreon. We just put up our Patreon exclusive episode, Holes, where me and B kind of, digging up them holes, dig it.
we really dig in to both the movie and the book, actually. We watched the movie for the first time. For me, in like a long time, I hadn't seen the movie. I'd never read the book, so there's a lot of interesting opinions going on there on Shia LaBeouf's acting, and also how sad it is about what happens to, is it a mule or is it a horse?
It's a mule. It's Mary Sue. Well, not Mary Sue.
No, different one. Mary Sue horse. That boring Mary Sue horse.
So the Mary Sue mule actually is really good at everything.
Yeah.
And that's why people hate it. Talking about the good old horse, Mary Lou.
Mary Lou. Yeah, there we go. Mary Lou, the horse who gets, or mule.
The horse, of course, it's a horse.
The equine creature who gets some bad
Shot
things
in the
happening to her.
face.
Yeah, bad things happen. Anyway, we'll talk about that over on Patreon.
So we're also going to be starting a new website. Does the horse die in the movie?
Does the horse die? Yes. Does the horse die in holes? Yes, it does. And yeah, if you guys want to follow us on Patreon, actually, anybody who donates $10 or more a month gets a commemorative personal pin made by yours truly. I'm like making the pin right now. We have one $10 a month donator, Patreon patron. So I'm designing Radio Camp Half-Blood pin. It will probably feature a Pegasus and orange and other such things. We'll figure it out together.
Because we're all in this together.
So if you're interested in that, then you can check out our Patreon.
Yes, and that's just type in on Patreon Radio Camp Half-Blood, and you can find it really easily, and all the money goes right back to the show. We're actually able to pay all of our fees. If we try to get to $40, we're going to read Harry Potter on the show.
We're going to read Harry Potter, you guys. You asked for it, and we will deliver. We will read Harry Potter. We will do this for you.
And all that money is going from just paying for the show to getting better equipment for both B and maybe me getting an actual fan in my recording booth.
Yeah.
You know, the little things in life.
You know, little investments here and there. So any amount we appreciate. We really appreciate all of our patrons. We also really appreciate all our listeners in general.
Yes, we do. We love every single one of you. I think that settles it. I mean,
Yeah.
I gotta get out of here before someone like lights a match and all the my closet explodes.
All your boy gases set flame.
Yeah.
All that patented boy stink.
I just feel like it's like there's a bottle that just says old fashioned Zach boy stink.
Do you know what'll solve that though? Some sploosh.
Sploosh. Get dysentery. Well, I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And keep staying mortal. Bye.
Bye guys.